Always forget to mute. Let's try that again. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. How good it is.
How good it is.
How sweet it is.
How sweet it is.
To be together on this day. How good it is.
How good it is.
How sweet it is.
How sweet it is.
To be together on this day. Everybody, hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. Oh yeah! Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. I'm throwing it to you. How good it is.
How good it is.
How sweet it is.
How sweet it is.
To be together on this day. How good it is.
How good it is.
How sweet it is.
How sweet it is.
To be together on this day. Everybody sing. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. One more time. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov by Alana Arian. Shout out to our friend. Thanks for that lovely tune. How wonderful it is to be together celebrating Sukkot.
This is one of my favorite holidays.
Me too. Hi, Ari.
Hello, Leslie.
Great to see you.
Great to see you too. Nice to be in the kitchen.
Yeah, nice to be in your kitchen. So to all of our Temple Emmanuel viewers, welcome. I'm so excited to be here tonight and to introduce you to my friend and colleague and classmate, Rabbi Ari Lorich, who is one of the rabbis at Central Synagogue in New York City. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here, and I want to, for those of you who are joining from Central Synagogue, introduce you to the one and only Leslie Nyren, who is a cantor over at Temple Emmanuel in Dallas, a classmate, a colleague, and one of the shining voices in the Reform movement and beyond. So it's great to be able to be here with you. Those of you who know What's the Dill should start checking her out at Cantor in the Kitch, where she's been throughout the quarantine putting up some amazing recipes that I've been following and even trying to emulate myself.
Thank you. That was such a lovely introduction. So we have What's the Dill? We have Cantor in the Kitch. We're joining forces for one unbelievable evening of, drumroll please, Clergy. What's the deal with Clergy in the Kitch?
It rolls off the tongue.
So Ari, what do you think is the deal with Clergy in the Kitch?
I don't know, but I mean, I've been somebody who's loved cooking and baking and being in the kitchen since I was a kid. And I know from having been classmates together that you've been cooking for a really long time. Your house was in Jerusalem, one of the gathering spots for our class for sure.
Yeah, it was so fun. I remember so many Shabbat dinners that whole year that we shared.
Sometimes, if you remember, I would come over to make use of your oven because I didn't have one.
Right, wait, you lived on that little President Street. What was it called?
I lived on Moshe Hess. Moshe
Hess.
But you were on Lincoln, I think.
Lincoln, and okay, there was also Washington. So there was Lincoln, Washington, and Hess. That's right. Right. You were the one person we all coveted because you had your own apartment.
It's true, but no oven, so there's some trade-offs.
Yeah, it was a real trade-off, that's for sure. So how many years ago was that fabulous year that we shared in Israel?
Well, that was 2008, 2009, so that's a depressing amount of years ago.
So long, but here we are singing and playing and cooking still together.
Yes.
Which is amazing.
For viewers of What's the Dill, they're accustomed to when we have guests on the show, the guests all answer certain interview questions, and I warned you that this would be part of the show, but not necessarily what the questions were going to be. But I don't want to break with tradition and custom. Our viewers have come to expect this. So do you mind if we do the What's the Dill interview questions?
I'm ready. Here we go.
All right. So the first question is, What's your earliest pickling memory? And that's not necessarily your first memory of like actually pickling, because most people, I don't think in their lives pickle much, but it
Right.
can be your first memory of eating something pickled.
So I think it would have to be going to Jewish delis as a kid. In Pittsburgh, we had like one big Jewish deli that everyone went to called Rhoda's. And my dad instilled his love of half sours to me. So I just love a good half sour pickle. Like you can't go to any Jewish deli without having that as part of your meal. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do. I'm a half sour person also. This is a divisive topic for our viewers, as you can imagine.
Oh my God. I'm
Half sour,
squarely
full
in the
sour.
half sour camp. Like dill, okay, fine, but like half sours are where it's at.
I don't even love when they play together in the same dish because the full sour juice ends up ruining my delicious, subtle, and refined half sours.
Literally couldn't agree more. We're like kindred spirits when it comes to half sours.
We've never known it all these years.
That's crazy because you couldn't get a half sour in Jerusalem to save your life.
No. Those were briny, garlicky, overdone pickles.
But you know what? I'll tell you my other pickling memory. Okay, I don't remember how old I was, but the first time I had a banh mi, I fell in love with the banh mi because of those pickles, the daikon and the carrot and the cucumber. It makes the whole sandwich sing. Do you agree with that?
I do. I mean, one of the things that we've been showing on our show a bunch is just like what I've been calling the pluralism of pickles, in the sense that every culture basically had to find a way to sustain themselves through the winter months, and so every culture has some kind of pickle that's theirs, and so there's sort of this united aspect to the way we eat food, and like every culture tends to have this accompanying pickle, condiment, or several that's part of their national dishes or part of the dishes that are like who they are.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. When it's your turn in the hot seat, I have a follow-up question around that for you.
All right. Well, next question is, what's your favorite vegetable to eat pickled?
Okay, it's okra. I know that's a little weird. I know you hate okra. I know. That was a great. Okay, I'm gonna tell you the story. I never had pickled okra in my life. Okay, he's like dying right now. This is hilarious. I work, like most Jewish professionals, 1 week of the summer every year. I work at Green Family Camp. Okay, camp food is not the best, okay? We can all agree about that. Thank God they have a salad bar. On the salad bar, there's a lot of pickled items, okay? One of the pickled items that I discovered at Green Family Camp is pickled okra. And like, it's so good. It's like crunchy, it's got the sour. I totally get why you don't like it. A lot of people have a texture issue with okra. If you cook it the wrong way, it's very slimy and gross.
Yeah.
Yes. But have you ever had it not slimy, or you won't even give it a chance?
No, I mean, I will give it a chance under certain conditions, but it's not what I reach for. But that's your favorite pickle, and I'm not here to pass judgment. This is a show that's very open-minded when it comes to pickled food.
That's good. Well, the half sour is number one, but I do like a nice pickled okra if it happens to be there.
All right. What about the next question is usually what's the most unusual pickle you've ever had?
Watermelon rind.
That's funny. My mom actually just sent me a recipe for pickled watermelon rind that she found in her recipe box from her neighbors growing up in the Chicago downtown in the city. I can't say the city when I'm living in New York. In Chicago. I'm gonna get hate mail for that now.
No. Okay.
But I like just missed the season to try it out.
Yeah, but you know what? You can still, I mean, watermelons aren't in season anymore. I know you're very into what's in season, but you could still try it. It's like end of summer. Okay, fine. We're already in fall. I feel like pickled watermelon rind is a very like frou-frou in thing right now because pickling has become such a it's just so popular. There's this restaurant, like neighborhood upscale restaurant. So it's casual, but it's like super expensive and upscale. They pickle everything. When you walk in, there's literally, it would be your heaven. There's jars of pickles above where everybody sits. Like everywhere you look, they have weird fermentation experiments going on. And I think I tried the pickled watermelon rind there as part of some summer dish. It was good.
But it's like such a humble, it's like what you're using scraps, right? Like it's about using every single scrap pickled watermelon rind.
Right. No, it's funny. I feel like pickling began as humble. I don't know how humble it is anymore because now it's like this in chefy thing to do, and they're making it so elevated with their cool ingredients. I don't know if it's humble anymore.
That's fair. That's fair. A bunch of congregants sent articles this week that have been talking about the national mason jar shortage.
Oh my God, I didn't know about that.
It's getting really hard if you're just getting into preserving and canning and pickling to find supplies because there's such a shortage right now. It's like, luckily I'm well outfitted, but I feel for the people who are just getting started.
That is hilarious. I just saw a very funny message from our friend, colleague, and classmate, Jacqueline Fermer-Cohen, who said, found myself in a bit of a pickle when I broke a molar on Leslie's chicken back in our Jerusalem. She literally, it wasn't my chicken was delicious. She must have had a problem with her tooth, and she bit into the chicken and it fell out. She had to go to the dentist in Jerusalem. It was a very traumatic experience for her that I still hear about regularly to this day.
So this is a disclaimer for those of you watching. Just be cautious as you try these recipes because you just don't know.
No, come on. Oh my God. Oh, she said in parentheses, worth it. The chicken was delicious.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Okay, what's my next question in the hot seat?
All right. The next question is, what's a condiment or something that you always have in your pantry you couldn't imagine being without and you throw it on everything?
Okay, this might come as a surprise, but Trader Joe's has a mixed nut butter that is to die for. It's every nut all mixed up, and it goes on literally everything. You can eat it savory, you can eat it sweet. It's good for a snack, it's good for a breakfast, it's good for a dessert. It's delicious.
Okay, all right. And last question. If you had to pick a salt that represents who you are, what would that salt be?
I'm a little torn between two salts, so let me just go with two. So I love a nice finishing salt, like a Malden or a Fleur de Sel. So great, right? On the top of a chocolate chip cookie. I mean, wow, delicious. On the top of vegetables when you're done with them. I mean, it just makes everything better. I have to say, close contender is the pink Himalayan salt. I just love it. It's beautiful. It makes dishes, gives them a little pop. It's supposed to have better health benefits for you. So I feel like either one of those could be my salt, kindred spirit. I'm not sure. I'm torn between both of those.
So you identify with the qualities of each?
Yeah, I do. I feel like the finishing salt is like the zest, the pizzazz. It's like the chatimah. It's the exclamation point at the end of the sentence. And don't you think that's what I give to things?
There's only one right answer to that question. Of course.
Okay, so basically, we're gonna have to go with the finishing salt.
All right.
That is zest. Okay, are you ready to be in the hot seat?
Yes.
Okay. What is your favorite comfort food meal?
Ooh. I think I would say comfort food meal. I really like fried chicken and waffles.
Oh my gosh, you should move to Texas. You're in the wrong state, honey.
There's some good spots here.
Okay. Fried chicken and waffles, nice. When did you develop your love of cooking and pickling?
Okay. Can I separate those two?
Yeah, separate. Two answers.
I think I grew up in a home where there was cooking going on all the time, and I was often designated to be a helper in the kitchen, and I think that just sort of bred a love of cooking and being in the kitchen for me. I remember, I didn't know what a sous chef was, but that was basically my job. And I think both with my mom and also with my grandma too, I can remember when she was baking, kind of being a helper. So I think that's what got me started loving being in the kitchen and cooking. Pickling was later. I didn't start pickling until I moved here to New York and started working as a rabbi. And if what's the deal? Listeners have heard this story, but I was getting towards high holidays, and I was looking for creative ways to procrastinate my sermon writing. And I had cleaned the apartment and organized everything, so I started trying to pickle because, New York, you just can't get good pickles here. So I thought I'd try my own.
So that's funny. I just assumed that you've been pickling for years and years and years and years.
No, it's only It's been about 7 years. 7 years.
Okay, but it's really come to full fruition in the time of the pandemic.
This was not a skill that I had shared with the congregation before this had started, but I was on parental leave, and while I was on leave, they were starting these episodes where each of the clergy had to put out some program or content, and they asked me what I wanted to do. And I thought, well, this is a time to share this passion of mine with the rest of the congregation.
That's awesome.
I thought, people, if we can be going to the market less, if we can be stretching our food more, both, I find pickling a great way to reduce food waste and also a way to keep our food that maybe we would otherwise throw out, we can do something with and actually keep it fresh and make it different and flavorful and awesome.
Yes, amen. What is one kitchen tool that you absolutely cannot live without?
I think a good chef's knife. I don't know what I would do without a good chef's knife.
Lovely answer. What is your favorite Jewish holiday / Jewish food? They may go together, they may not.
My favorite Jewish holiday is Pesach, hands down. Favorite food? So, I grew up and I developed an allergy to walnuts and apples.
Oh!
Meant I couldn't have Ashkenazi charoset, which was the only charoset I knew growing up. But my aunt felt for me and developed my own charoset that was always mine for Pesach, that was almond and pear, and then cinnamon and wine. And it was really, it's really good. I still try to make it, and I think of my aunt when I do.
That's awesome. I love that story. If you could have one meal in Israel right now, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a restaurant in Tel Aviv called North of Abraxas.
I've never been, but I've heard good things about it.
I would, that's where I would transport myself if I could.
Love it. I thought you were going to say that hummus place in Jerusalem that you loved.
Hummus Ben Sira is amazing, and I don't mean to minimize it, but if I had one meal, that's the meal I would choose.
Okay, and last question. So Ari, for my viewers who aren't familiar with Rabbi Ari, comes from a very long line of rabbis in his family, which is amazing. So cool. Did you feel a lot of pressure to become a rabbi? Like, did you feel like, duh, of course, that's the only possible way it can go? And how did you know it was the right path for you? And you can throw in a little bit of bragging about your long lineage of rabbis if you want to.
No. No, yes and no. I didn't feel like I had any pressure being put on me that this was the path I should choose. But when I started thinking to myself that this was maybe the path I wanted to choose, I very specifically didn't share it with my family until I was applying to rabbinical school. I think, in my mind, I kind of decided in high school, at the end of high school, that this is probably what I wanted to do. But I went through most of undergraduate just not saying that to anyone because I didn't want to say that and then change my mind because I fell in love with some other subject or path. And so I really didn't tell anyone in my family until I had the application ready and was going to, start really filling it out. And, not because I think anybody would have reacted poorly, and that was probably an immature thing to do, but I don't know. It felt like once I said that out loud, I couldn't change that then. There'd be this, people would be talking about it, so.
Awesome. Cool. I feel like we should throw one question to our viewers so they can type their answers in the chat box. What do we want to ask them?
What food makes them think of autumn?
Oh, yes. What a great segue. Love it. What food makes you think of autumn?
Or when you think autumn, what food do you think of? You can do it either way.
Okay, awesome. So as those answers start to pour in, that is a perfect segue to our next segment.
So we're going to do two different things with butternut squash. True to What's the Dill, I'm going to talk you through a quick pickled recipe for butternut squash. We're here, it's Sukkot, it's a holiday that celebrates the harvest, and here in America we are full of pumpkins, gourds, squashes are all coming, and they look great, and they are tasting wonderful. And a lot of what we do with pickling is trying to take things at peak season and preserve them so that we can enjoy them off season. So I wanted to share a recipe that I found for pickled butternut squash. You might not be thinking that like, oh, I really wanted to pickle butternut squash, but it is really tasty, and it does something that I think baked squash or other forms of squash don't do. If you have your recipe card, which I think we have posted, is that right, Cantor?
Yes, it is up there. It is tagged, so you can just click on that card and you'll see all those. There's 3 recipes up there.
So the first step you needed to do, and again, if you're pickling along, that's okay. You're a little bit behind. You need to salt the cubes of butternut squash for about 3 hours in the fridge. And you're doing this for a few reasons. The main reason is you're going to draw out any excess moisture. And by doing that, the pickle, the flavor of the vegetable is going to be more pronounced. And it's going to kind of punch up the flavors that you find already in the squash. So what you do is you take about 2 tablespoons or 1 tablespoon of salt in a bowl like this. You put your cubes of squash in. You want to keep your cubes of squash when you break down the squash about 1 inch thick or so that it doesn't get soggy and dissolve. You're going to salt it and let it just sit in your fridge for about 3 hours. And then you're going to put it over your sink in a colander and let all of that moisture just run off. And then you're going to actually rinse the squash to get all of that salt off, because we don't want all of that salt. Once it's rinsed, you're going to let it dry up. And then in another pot, you're going to boil some water. Once the water is to a boil, you're going to blanch your squash, which is a really fancy way of saying boil it for a short amount of time. In this case, you're going to add your squash to the boiling water. Once the water comes to a boil again, it should only take a minute, maybe 2. But as soon as it comes back to a boil, you're going to take the squash out of the boiling water and you're going to put it in a bowl of ice water to shock it back to a regular temperature and to stop the cooking process. What will happen if you don't do that is the squash is going to get too soft and you're going to end up with a really unsatisfying pickle. There's nothing worse than that. I think we can all agree.
No mushy pickles.
So no mushy pickles. What you want is a nice firm texture so that you don't end up with a jar full of mush. That brings you up to where I'm at. So once you've done those steps, and it sounds maybe like a lot, but I promise it's not. It doesn't take that long. Most of it's waiting, right? Just waiting for the salt in the fridge to do its work, waiting for the water to boil. Otherwise, it's actually much simpler than it sounds. But once you're ready, you're going to take apple cider vinegar. Make sure that it's 5% acidity. Almost all vinegar in America is, but you might just want to double check, because every now and then if you're at a fancy frou-frou store, maybe you have vinegar that's not diluted to the right percentage. But 5%, you're going to take 2.5 cups, and you're going to add 3/4 of a cup of sugar, and you're going to let that heat up to a boil. So my we're basically making a pickling liquid. And my pickling liquid is coming up to a boil. I've been letting it sit. I'm going to bring it up now a little bit higher in temperature. Alright, so now it's starting to simmer, and my house is starting to smell of vinegar, so you do have to make sure that you're okay with that when you're pickling. I have taken all of those aromatics, those amazing flavor-filled aromatics that are listed in the recipe. We have peppercorn, ginger, a little bit of garlic, bay leaves, cloves, fennel, and cardamom.
Wow, delicious.
You want to make sure those are whole spices that you're using. You don't want to use any powders. And you're going to you can do this 2 ways. I've wrapped mine in a cheesecloth so that I can easily remove these aromatics and spices. If you don't want to do that, you can put them all into the pickling liquid directly, but then you'll just need to filter them out. Make sense?
That's awesome. Wow.
So now that my vinegar is at a rapid boil, I'm going to lower the temperature a bit and add my spices, and we are going to boil that for 5 minutes. What you're doing is you're infusing the vinegar with all of those flavors. And an infused vinegar is really delicious. We've made them in our show both for pickling like this, but also just infused vinegars to have around. because it's a great way to have a lot more flavor for things like salad dressings or to do quick pickles. So I have a bunch of different vinegars that I let sit at room temperature with different aromatics like rosemary, lemon peel, orange peel. And if you do that for 2 weeks and then strain it out, you have a really, really amazing vinegar with all this flavor that you didn't have before.
So the reason you're using whole spices instead of powdered spices is because it's just a stronger, more pungent flavor at the end, right?
Well, yeah. So it's I think 2 reasons. One is whole spices hold their flavor longer. Powdered spices, whenever you use them, it's kind of similar to coffee, right? You might want like if you're into coffee, you probably buy whole bean coffee and you grind it up yourself, or you grind it as close to when you're going to be using it as possible because the flavor starts to degrade as soon as you grind it up. The other reason is we want to be able to take these spices out of the pickling liquid. Any spice or aromatic that you leave in the pickling liquid is going to intensify the flavor over time as it sits in the jar. Sometimes you want this, and you'll deliberately leave the spices in. You sometimes see this with jars of pickles that have peppercorns or dill in them and things like that. You want those flavors to intensify over time. But if you don't want the flavors to intensify over time, you have to remove the spices. Otherwise, they're just going to develop stronger and stronger flavor as the week goes on.
Yeah, that happened with a batch of half sours I made actually recently.
It can be like, I really like spicy food, and so I like leaving sometimes chilies in because it really, over time, gets more and more hot. But, there are definitely times when I've let them sit too long and they're just not edible anymore because of it.
Yes.
So I'm going to then start packing my mason jar here. This is a quart mason jar. You can use any size. And I'm going to start packing it full of these blanched pieces of squash. And you want to try to shake it up a little bit and make sure that you're getting as much squash in here as you can. You don't want to pack it so tight that the squash ends up smushing against each other because, again, you're going to get soggy, gross, mushy pickles. But you also want to make sure you don't have wide, gaping, sections that are just going to be unused because, if you're going to the trouble of pickling something, as much product as you can get in, makes a difference because it takes a while. This is not labor unintensive, and if you can fill it up as much as possible, you should. I'm going to leave a little bit of room at the top.
Can you do a close-up in your camera of the pickle jar so we can see exactly how big those pieces are?
Absolutely. I'm just going to turn my pickling liquid on low, and I'm going to let that sit now that it's done for 5 minutes off the rapid heat. And I'll show you both. So here, high-end production here. Here you have just the cubes of squash all stacked up. Kind of looks like cantaloupe a bit.
Yeah.
And again, it should feel, and you should be able to handle it, it should feel firm, but you should on the edges be able to kind of have some give to it, right? You don't want to break your teeth on anything we make. Sorry again, Jacqueline. And then here you'll see you can see the spices are steeping in the brine here.
Yeah.
And the sugar is completely dissolved. And this is going to be a really lovely pickling liquid.
So you could probably use that for other things too, like a million other things, right?
Yeah, so here's a jar that I made as maybe about a month ago when I first saw butternut squash come in the stores. And in general, if you're using, it's different if you're doing a fermentation. But if you're doing a pickling like this, where you're creating a pickling liquid that's not going to, right, this is not going to ferment. We're preserving it using the vinegar and the sugar in this case. And those kinds of pickling liquids can be really delicious. So in this case, I've used a bunch of the liquid to create, this is vinegar that's been infused, so it makes a really delightful salad dressing as a vinaigrette. And you can use it in all kinds of ways because it's basically flavored vinegar. So I strain it. I might add a little sugar if I want it to be a little sweeter. And then if you blend it into a vinaigrette with mustard, olive oil, it's really wonderful.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be great for an autumn salad.
Yes, it is really great. And especially if you're using it alongside a salad where you're going to put in the pickled squash, the flavors are all enhancing each other because the flavors that are in the vinegar are also now eventually completely in the squash as well once it's pickled.
Yeah, awesome.
And then essentially you just add the pickling liquid into the jar, either using a ladle or this tried and true method.
So those jars would never crack. They're heat sensitive.
These are mason jars. You want to make sure you're using mason jars because those are meant to handle extreme temperatures like this. So that's why, and they're more or less indestructible. You want to make sure as you use them over the years, but they're meant to be used over the years.
Yeah.
If you see chips or cracks, you should stop using them. But most of my jars I've had for 8 years now and have not needed to replace.
That's awesome.
The thing that you replace is eventually you're going to, right, I try to make this as, when we're pickling, you can get all kinds of fancy gadgets, and I try to just do things you would otherwise have at home. The things you probably don't have at home if you've never done this before are the mason jar and the lids that go on with them. It's a double band system that those aren't reusable.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Your bands can be reused, but the lids shouldn't be.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah. You want to avoid botulism,
Okay, great. So, Ari, I bet that liquid would be amazing in a mixed drink, too, like a fall mixed drink.
It would be, and I haven't played around with that yet. I did over the summer when I was trying to preserve all of my peaches that I fell in love with. I made a vanilla bourbon preserved peach, and that pickling liquid has been amazing in mixed drinks.
Yeah, I bet this one would be, too. I mean, you could maybe... I could picture it with rum, or you could even do it in like a cider, like an apple cider, mulled cider, and then you could, add some of these spices. I don't know. You could play around with it.
Yeah, and I plan to.
It's versatile.
So what you want to do is let this come to room temperature, put a lid on it, and then put it in your fridge for a week. You do not want to try it before that week is up, because squash, and these are somewhat thicker pieces, is not as porous as, say, like a radish or a cucumber. It needs about a week to sit and marinate before it's ready.
Awesome.
I can show you what I've done with a few finished versions, if you'd like.
Yeah, let's see it.
So the first thing I did with this was I chopped up the whole pieces into cubes, and I put it into a fall kind of like autumn salad with kale and some croutons. You could put farro in that, and then these added a really nice pop of acid. And I used the pickling liquid to make the vinaigrette. But here I've just made a few tartines. Give me 1 second, I need to finish one.
We'll be here, don't worry. So, guys, on Facebook, we are open to any questions. We want this to be an open dialogue, so feel free to shoot some questions into the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer them. You're doing great with all these fun messages. It feels like we're almost in the same room together. So thanks for joining us. Whoa, that looks awesome over there.
Yeah, this is just a little aged balsamic. So here I've done 2 different tartines. You can see. On this side here we have slices of the pickle that are sitting over a goat cheese with crushed red pepper and a chili-infused honey, right? So this is going to be a little bit spicier, but on this side we have goat cheese with the cubed pickle and some balsamic vinegar, aged balsamic vinegar.
Nice. Those look delicious.
They will be. But in general, I think these pickles, right, the goat cheese is really nice with it because it's kind of a tangy, kind of sour, sharp cheese, right? And it's going to dull some of the vinegar, but it also, they need a little bit of sweetness, so either the honey or the balsamic adds a really nice note to them.
Yeah, delish. Yum. So before anything else about this pickle, before we move on?
I don't think so. It's probably not the first thing you think of when you think pickles is butternut squash. But again, if you're somebody who loves these flavors and you're going to be sad come the winter that you can't get them, this is a way to keep them going. But they're also, as I think Leslie will show you, there you can also enhance your autumn dishes now using them. Also, I did eat those vanilla bourbon peaches in the summer, even though I kept a few jars for fall and winter. But you sometimes make pickles that are so delicious, you need to enjoy them in season too.
So I want to know how many jars of cherries, blueberries, peaches, nectarines do you still have under your bed? Because I've been following the whole story.
Yeah, the cucumbers don't last long. I go through those quickly. I go through the vegetables a lot faster than I go through the preserved fruits, and it's partially because I can get my hands on them almost year round, and also because I try to pace myself with vanilla bourbon peaches or those kind of sweet and sour nectarines you saw. I give a lot away because that's an important part of this. I really am somebody who grew up baking and cooking for other people, and so that's a big part of why I do this. Is I think because it's I connect through food, and it's a way that people showed love in my house, and I think it's a way I try to throw love out into the world. But there's probably more jars than my wife would like.
I bet. I can only imagine. So before we look at butternut squash soup and a little delicata squash recipe, Ari and I wanted to take just a little interlude to share some throwback photos with you from our year in Israel and just walk down memory lane a little bit. I know that one of our friends and classmates is here, so she'll get a kick out of this. So Ari, do you want to share a few photos and then we can tell a few fun stories to go along with the photos?
Yes. Okay, so I didn't know that I was going to go first, so give me 1 sec.
Okay, well I can go first. Let me see if I can. Technology. Amazing and frustrating. Wait, I have to find. You know when you have too many windows open and you can't find what you were looking for?
I do. All right, I can go first.
Okay, go for it.
All right, so here is the first photo I'll share. This is, I think, a group of us before New Year's?
Yes, that was New Year's Eve when we did that duet that's on our cover photo.
Yes, you can see the duet here in the lower corner, the two of us singing a karaoke duet. I do not recall the song.
I'm pretty sure it was Grease. It was, what's the duet?
Was it?
Summer Lovin'. I think it was Summer Lovin'.
All right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was what it was.
And so this is prior to that. I don't know. Those moments actually, if you look at the dress code here, I'm going to use some sleuthing detective skills to say that was not the same night.
Oh, wait, you're right. So
See what I'm saying?
Wait, let's go back to that. Okay, what was that?
This is definitely New Year's. I'm not sure what the karaoke's from. Jacqueline might remember.
Okay, you're right. We went to that karaoke bar many times. So there was one time before New Year's. Yeah, you're exactly right. You're exactly right.
This is us, I'm pretty sure, in your apartment on one of those Shabbat dinners.
I think that's probably correct. Yes, there were many dinners had on Shabbat and regular weeknights in that apartment.
And to clarify, the street that Leslie lived on was called Lincoln, which is how they pronounce Abraham Lincoln's name in Israel. They pronounce the silent L, or Lamed in Hebrew. So they call him Abraham Lincoln. So that was the street she lived on. And then this is a trivia question. Since it is autumn and we're celebrating things autumn, we had a Halloween get-together with the entire class. And I was charged with trying to find a pumpkin so we can make a jack-o'-lantern. Here was the finished product. But Leslie, do you remember, because it wasn't pumpkin, what I ended up making a jack-o'-lantern out of?
I I really honestly couldn't remember. Jacqueline seems to have an amazing memory. I'll be very impressed. She seems to be dominating the conversation right now on Facebook. If she remembers what that jack-o'-lantern is made out of, I will be very impressed.
So,
I had no recollection at all.
all right, so yeah, not a pumpkin to be found in Israel on October 31st, but I believe it was probably Joel who went with me to the grocery store, and we found a cantaloupe that we ended up carving into this lovely jack-o'-lantern you see in front of you.
It worked so well. I mean, it really looks like a pumpkin. I would have never known if you didn't tell me.
Once it got dark out, yeah. I think in the daylight it didn't look as impressive. You have some other photos.
Okay, so Ari and I, let me see if I can make this big. We had our internship together, actually, that year. Our Shabbat internship. So we worked at this, where did it go?
So yeah, everybody had a service project they had to be a part of. We were all assigned to different places all over Jerusalem and the greater Jerusalem area. And yeah, we ended up getting signed up for the same project. So was it once a month or every other week? I don't remember.
It was once a month.
Once a month. We went to a community just outside of Jerusalem called Sur Hadassah, and we led 2 Shabbat services. One for I don't remember exactly. Maybe this is inside Jerusalem. I don't remember exactly.
I think no. This was. Oh, you're right. We went to 2 places. We went to Sur Hadassah, and then we went to what was the name of that? It was a home for adults.
I don't remember the name of it, but
I cannot remember the name of this place.
And we would go from here then to Sur Hadassah to their community.
Yes, this was very inspiring. Let's see. There's Ari's back. So I had literally just learned to play guitar a year before this, and I had no idea what I was doing, and it was unbelievable to be able to play with Ari once a month. I wouldn't even call what I was doing playing. I was attempting to play with Ari once a month. And Ari grew up as a song leader at Osrui, one of the URJ summer camps, and he was incredible at guitar and song leading. And I just remember, I don't know what that is, asking him a million questions about chords and how do you do this and how do you do that. And it was just like such an honor to get to play with such an amazing guitarist as I was just learning how to strum and how to find the right chords and everything. So that was a really fun and bonding experience for Ari and I.
Yeah, I think we always had a good time, and it was always something of adventure getting there and getting back, and the whole year was something of an adventure for sure.
Yes. Jacqueline, Aviva just popped on. We have so many pictures. We'll have to have maybe a reunion tour afterwards. We don't need to torture everybody with our pictures, but there are a lot more pictures where those came from.
Yes.
Like thousands more. So Ari is actually also an amazing photographer, and I have to say, I need to have a little lesson with you. You're way beyond me for how to best to photograph my food at this point, even just using the iPhone. So did you take photography classes, or has this been a hobby of yours since you were a kid?
It's been a hobby for a long time. My dad has always been a really active and avid photographer, and so I grew up with him around the camera and sort of learning through what I saw him doing and him kind of letting me use his cameras and explore. So I don't have any formal training in it, but I've been around it my whole life for sure. Especially when we're in different places or traveling, like it was when we were in the year in Israel, or then when we were back in Israel as interns, there's just, I don't know.
Yes, Ari and I had another Israel experience after our fourth year of school. We both got to spend the summer in Jerusalem. It's kind of funny. We call ourselves interns, but we're actually shepherding the young first year in Israel students through that summer process. Getting used to being there and leading worship services for them and all that stuff. So we had another summer of cooking and singing and exploring in Jerusalem, which was also amazing. So should we do a little bit of butternut squash?
Yeah.
Okay. So I pre-made the soup. I just want to talk you guys through how I did it.
I do want to say I was very excited because my dad actually every Thanksgiving makes a butternut squash soup. So I was excited to see that this was going to be part of what we do today.
Amazing. Okay, so who doesn't love a good butternut squash soup? It's just incredible. We would love to hear from our viewers on Facebook right now. If you want to type into the chat any butternut squash or butternut squash soup stories that you might have. Here's a look at our butternut squash soup.
A note to the What's the Dill community, I'm very jealous of this camera angle and will be trying to replicate it in episodes to come.
Yes, you just need a couple different devices and you're in business. So, okay, so here's what I did. I took, one butternut squash, I cut it up, or you can cheat and buy Trader Joe's just bags of butternut squash. They've already done all the hard work for you. Great option.
Frozen or fresh?
What'd you say?
Frozen or fresh?
Fresh. I would go fresh always. But you could do frozen, but I would go fresh. So I put it on a big roasting pan, put some, give it a toss with some olive oil, a little salt, a little pepper. I think I might have drizzled a little bit of maple syrup on there. You could use agave, you could use date syrup, is delicious. One of my favorite sweetener alternatives. And then I kind of gave it a little toss. Make sure that all the squash has a little room to roast. I put my oven on about 425 and I roasted it for about 45, 50 minutes until it's nice and caramelized. Put all that goodness into a blender. I used a Vitamix. I actually also today, for the first time ever, made my own veggie broth. I'm in a state right now where I'm avoiding onions and garlic. Lots of good tasting things. So I wanted to make my own veggie broth so I didn't have to deal with the store-bought stuff. I have to say, I will never buy veggie broth again. It was delicious. It was cheaper. It was better. I mean, unbelievable. Do you do this yourself?
So I haven't made veggie broth, and I'm curious to hear what went into yours. But I have started saving up. I'm disclosing so much that's new. I've started saving up chicken bones to make my own chicken bone broth.
Yes, I mean, unbelievable. Like, why would you buy it when you can make it just as good in your own house, right?
And for almost no cost.
Yes. Okay, so veggie broth is extremely easy and versatile. You can basically do anything. Today I put in 2 chopped up carrots, a couple pieces of chopped up celery, and the leaves. They have so much flavor. I put in 2 bay leaves. I put in a couple sprigs of fresh thyme, a couple sprigs of fresh parsley, salt. You need a lot of salt to make a broth, but less salt than you get in that crappy one you buy in the store.
Much less sodium than you're going to get in store-bought stuff.
Yes, pepper. If I was making a regular broth and I wasn't avoiding certain foods, I would have also put garlic and onion and leek. If I had fennel, I would have put fennel in. I love the taste of fennel. I think it gives such a great, bright, springy flavor to broth. And then you just literally boil. First, you cook it for 10 minutes. You let the kind of flavors of the veggies come out. You put your water in. I think I did 4 cups of water. It wasn't that much. It was a small batch. And then you boil it. And then as soon as it comes to a boil, you bring it to a simmer. And it simmers for, I think it simmered for 45, 50 minutes, almost an hour. No, maybe it was half an hour. Somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes before it all evaporates. And then I just put it through a strainer, a fine strainer, really fine, because you want to get all that crap out of it. Like the little pieces of thyme fell off and all that stuff, the twigs. And then so I put a couple cups of my fresh veggie broth right into my Vitamix. I might have added a tiny little bit more maple syrup, probably a little more salt, and just blitzed it. I put it on the soup option. You can also just use a high-speed blender. You could use an immersion blender, would work great. And then I poured it back into the pot, and I am going to, let's see if I can find a little spot here. So go ahead.
I'm going to say the amazing thing is once you actually have broth that you've made, you can then really use it as a replacement for a lot of things that you may otherwise use water for, like rice, or as the base for a lot of different things. And just having it around the house all of a sudden really opens up a lot more flavor. And it's not like rice is not great when you boil it in water, but when you use stock, all of a sudden it adds a whole new dimension to the flavor.
Yes, 100%. I can't believe I'd never done it before. I watched so many cooking shows, and during the whole pandemic, there's this one, Michael, what's his name on Food Network? He's great. Anyway, he talked about how easy it is to make your own chicken broth, your own veggie broth, and I thought, I want to do that, because you can really control what goes into it and make it according to your tastes, you know?
It's also a great way to use food scraps. You know, if you're
Yes.
somebody who likes to, after you clean a carrot, then grate off the skin or chop off the ends. If you start holding on to those things, or chop off the bottom of a celery stalk, and after you clean it, all of that stuff can be used to make vegetable broth. You don't have to just throw it away.
So yes, 100%. I took the seeds from that. Which one did I use? Oh, this is the delicata squash. We're gonna get to in a minute. I roasted them at 350 for like 10, 12 minutes, and put a little salt, pepper, a little cinnamon,
Those are great.
and yeah, they're so good and crunchy and delicious, and it's a perfect topper for this soup. I also put a little tiny swirl of this basil infused, can you see that? Basil infused olive oil. And if I had a can of open coconut milk, I would put a little bit of that. It's really pretty. And then I took some sage leaves before, and I just kind of fried them up in a hot pan. And that's like a really, really great garnish. You just put a few, and the last finishing touch, you don't have to do all of these, but I wanted to give you options. I love, love, love crispy shiitake mushrooms as a topper for butternut squash. It gives it this awesome umami flavor, and it brings a whole new element to the dish. Literally, a little bit of these shiitakes go a really long way. So that, in your own home, restaurant quality butternut squash soup with gorgeous garnishes. Doesn't that look delicious?
It does, and that crispy sage is actually making me think like, oh, I wish I had some of that to top these toasts, because like that sage and butternut squash combination is so good.
It's so good. So that's a super easy recipe. And the last thing I wanted to share with you, I absolutely adore delicata squash. It's my, I was going to say favorite, but butternut squash topped for number one. Butternut squash and delicata. The cool thing about delicata squash is that you can eat the outside. It becomes soft when you cook it. So I cut off the top, I cut off the bottom, I cut it into rings. The thinner rings or half moons, the faster it's gonna roast on your roasting pan. So I did them pretty thin today. I tossed all of those rings into a big bowl. Olive oil, salt, tiny little bit of pepper, nutmeg, cinnamon. You could also do a pumpkin pie spice. And if you didn't want to go sweet, you could go savory and do, you could do a yellow curry powder. Delicious. It's so versatile. You can go sweet or savory with all of these squashes. I personally love this one sweet. So we have our delicata squash. I put it into the oven, I think 425 for 45-50 minutes. It's on that recipe card that you have. And then you just plate it up. And I like to garnish with, in the fall, a couple pomegranate seeds, just for some beautiful color. I have always loved pomegranate seeds. They're like the most gorgeous fruit. They're like these little jewels. And when you open one up, you never know exactly what it's going to look like, where they're going to be hiding. They're just gorgeous. And of course, we know it's said that there are 613 pomegranate seeds to represent the 613 meats vote. I would also take a little bit of microgreens, just because every dish needs a little pop of freshness at the end to give it a little green. And there you go. You could also throw some of those delicata squash seeds that I roasted right on top of here for a little bit of added crunch. Delicious. And there you go. You've got a gorgeous side veggie dish. A little bit sweet, a little bit savory, a lot of delicious.
Plated beautifully.
Thank you. So
you reminded me one thing I just want to share with the folks.
Yes.
This same recipe we used to pickle the butternut squash, you can use for pumpkin or other squash like acorn squash. But something as thin as the delicata squash is not going to work. You need something that's going to be about an inch thick once you take out the seeds and the skin.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, this was just so much fun. Thank you, Ari, for doing this collaboration.
This was great. This was a great way to mark Sukkot and get a chance to spend some time with Cantor in the kitchen.
And what's the dill? I love it. So you can follow us both on Instagram. What's the dill? Cantor in the Kitch. We'd love to see you stop by and check out our food. How do you toast the shiitake mushrooms? I just put them into a pan on really high heat. I dry roast them for a little bit first, and then I add a little bit of olive oil, and they just suck up that olive oil and get super crunchy. Put out a paper towel, put them on the paper towel. It'll drain the excess oil, and they'll just be nice and crunchy and delicious. So if you have any questions as we do our final closing song, feel free to put them into the chat. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to see you on social media. Ari and I both do these sort of regularly. I'm doing mine once a month. How often are you doing yours?
It's been varying. We're doing a little bit less than we were over the summer, so probably once a month or so, and maybe we'll do another collaboration come Hanukkah or something.
I would love that. It would be so much fun. Okay, so Ari and I are going to sing the closest thing to singing together. We're going to do an echo song in honor of Sukkot. Such a beautiful harvest holiday. This is called In My Sukkah. It goes like this.
Join me on the echo, everybody. Join me on the echo.
Yes, everybody, here we go. I built a little sukkah.
I built a little sukkah.
Out in the back.
Out in the back.
It looks like a house.
It looks like a house.
And a little like a shack.
And a little like a shack.
It's not too big.
Not too big.
And it's not too high.
And it's not too high.
When you sit inside.
When you sit inside.
You can see the sky.
You can see the sky.
Shake, shake, shake the lula. Smell the etrog so sweet. Come and have a look in my sukkah and help yourself to something to eat. In my sukkah, in my sukkah, in my sukkah. Here we go, you sound great. I built the roof.
I built a roof.
Of sticks and twigs.
Of sticks and twigs.
I strung up apples.
Strung up apples.
And some nuts and figs.
And some nuts and figs.
And some bananas.
Some bananas.
That's not all.
That's not all.
There were fruits and veggies.
There were fruits and veggies.
All over the walls.
All over the walls.
Shake, shake, shake the lula. Smell the etrog so sweet. Come and have a look in my sukkah. Help yourself to something to eat. In my sukkah. In my sukkah. In my sukkah. Come on, sukkah. We got one more verse. Let's hear you. I built my sukkah.
Built my sukkah.
Cloth and wood.
Something in wood.
It looks so pretty.
It looks so pretty.
And it smells so good.
And it smells so good.
With leaves and branches.
Leaves and branches.
All around.
All around.
We're gonna light the candles.
Gonna light the candles.
When the sun goes down.
Till the sun goes down.
Shake, shake, shake the lula. Smell the etrog so sweet. Come and have a look in my sukkah. Help yourself to something to eat. In my sukkah. In my sukkah.
Easy, yeah.
In my sukkah. Woo!
All right, that's a Chag Sameach right there.
Amazing! Thank you for singing with me, Rabbi Ari Lorich.
Great to be with you, Cantor Leslie Nyron.
So fun! Wow!
Early Shabbat Shalom to everybody, and an early Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom. Great to see you. See you next time.